Hi, enjoy listening. The wind off the harbour carried a bite that evening, even though the calendar still insisted it was early October. In the corner of an old fishing district, tucked behind a chain-link fence with rust curling its edges, a sagging cinder block building leaned into the darkness. Inside, under a single dim bulb, Rebecca Carver sat on the edge of a warped cot, her thin frame hunched forward. The metal springs creaked when she coughed, and the sound made her daughter's stomach twist. "Mom!" Hannah blurted out, her voice cracking before she can stop it. "Please tell me what I can do to help you. Anything." The words came out hot and fast, tangled with the tears she had been holding back all day. Rebecca's weather-worn face softened, though the lines of pain never really left. "Sweetheart, you've already done more than any daughter should ever have to. And look at where I've landed you, sleeping in this." She gestured weakly to the cracked walls, the draft slipping in through a broken window pane. "This place. No heat, no privacy. And every dollar you make at that daycare goes straight to my medicine." "Don't say it like that," Hannah answered quickly, forcing a small smile. "We're not out of options." Rebecca studied her, suspicion mixed with the weary acceptance of someone who'd learned life never handed second chances. "What do you mean by that?" Hannah hesitated only a second before leaning forward, her eyes glinting with something between hope and desperation. "We still have one thing left. Mom, that painting. The one you did when you were younger. Before..." She caught herself before saying, "before Dad left." "It's beautiful. Somebody out there will pay for it. Enough to get you through rehab. Maybe even rent somewhere decent." Rebecca closed her eyes. In her mind, she could see it. The oil on canvas of a golden pine grove. Sun slanting through tall trunks. A couple strolling the path, hand in hand. She had painted it when she was 23, back when she still believed her life would be steady and safe. It was the last painting she had ever done for herself, before years of exhaustion, heartbreak, and factory work stole the colour from her hands. "That's not just a painting, Hannah. It's the last piece of me I've got," Rebecca said softly. "I promised myself I'd never sell it. And I promised myself I wouldn't let you get stuck in a chair for the rest of your life just because we're broke," Hannah replied, the quiet conviction in her tone silencing her mother. She got up, brushing off the dust from her jeans. "I'm going to try. I saw an article in a magazine. There's a hotel up on Westcliff Bay, all marble floors and rich tourists. If anyone would buy art on a whim, it's someone staying there." Rebecca didn't answer right away. She stared at the small, portable heater buzzing weakly in the corner, the only thing standing between them and the cold. She wanted to argue, to tell Hannah the world didn't work that way, that rich people didn't just hand over cash to strangers with a sad story. But when she looked into her daughter's eyes, she saw the same stubborn glint she used to have at that age. The same refusal to give up. "Just be careful," Rebecca finally said. "That painting's the last thing tying us to the life we had." Hannah squeezed her hand. "If I come back with nothing, we still have each other. That's what matters." Outside, the gulls screamed over the dark water, and a damp chill slid into the room. The painting, wrapped in an old bedsheet and propped in the corner, seemed to watch them both, as if it knew it was about to decide their future. By late morning the next day, Hannah was standing at the edge of Westcliff Bay's coastal highway, waiting for the only bus that came this far out from the city's old fishing district. The painting, carefully swaddled in layers of thrift store blankets, was tucked under her arm. The bundle was heavier than it looked, and her fingers kept going numb from gripping it too tightly. She had dressed as neatly as she could manage. Black slacks, a cream sweater with the faintest unravelling at one cuff, and a pair of boots she'd polished until the scuffed leather almost looked new. She had no illusions about the way she would be sized up at a place like the Westcliff Bay Hotel. Appearances were currency there. The bus groaned to a stop in front of her, its brakes squealing. Inside, the heater blasted warm air that smelled faintly of diesel. She sank into a seat near the back, her bundle balanced across her knees. Out the fogged window, the cityscape thinned into rolling stretches of wind-blown grass and cedar groves. Somewhere in the distance, the sea flashed in quick, cold glimpses. The farther they went, the more it felt like leaving her own life behind. A hotel rose like a white stone palace over the cliffs. Polished windows caught the sun and flung it across the bay. Even from the driveway, she could see guests sipping wine on the terrace, dressed in linens and expensive sunglasses despite the autumn chill. Inside, the lobby was a cavern of quiet elegance. Marble floors, massive chandeliers dripping with crystal, and an arrangement of orchids that looked too perfect to be real. Every sound seemed muffled here, as though even voices were expected to behave. Hannah approached the front desk. Behind it, a young man in a navy vest and perfect posture looked up from his computer. His name tag read Cole. "Good afternoon, miss. Are you checking in?" His tone was polite but faintly guarded. "Not exactly," Hannah said, clearing her throat. I have something I'd like to offer for sale. It's a painting. Original. My mother painted it. I think it could be of interest to your guests." Cole's expression didn't change, but the pause was long enough for her to feel the weight of it. "I'm sorry, but we don't usually handle private sales on site. Perhaps there's a gallery." "I've tried galleries," Hannah interrupted before she could stop herself. "They either want to take a huge commission or they tell me to come back in the spring. I don't have until spring." For the first time, something flickered across Cole's face, a tiny shift, like he recognized the undercurrent in her voice. "Still," he said, "the manager would need to approve anything like that. I can see if he's available." As he disappeared into an office behind the desk, Hannah's stomach tightened. This was her one shot today. Her bus fare had taken most of what she had left in cash. If this didn't work, she wasn't sure when she'd get another chance. When Cole returned, it wasn't alone. A woman in her early 30s followed him out. A sleek bob haircut, tailored blazer, and a smile so professional it bordered on unreadable. Her name tag read Dana, assistant manager. "I understand you're looking to sell a piece of art," Dana said, glancing at the bundle in Hannah's arms. "Yes," Hannah said, peeling back the blankets to reveal the painting. The light caught the varnished surface, and for a moment The grove seemed to glow. The path through the pines, stretching endlessly into the warm horizon. Dana's brows lifted slightly. "It's lovely," she admitted. "Your mother painted this." "She's a trained artist," Hannah said quickly. "Well, she was, before." She stopped herself from saying too much, then added, "I think someone here might appreciate it, even for decor in one of your suites." Dana hesitated, studying the painting. Hannah could tell she was thinking it over, weighing hotel policy against the fact that it was, undeniably, a striking piece. Finally, Dana said, "Why don't you leave your name and number? I can pass along some photos to our general manager." Hannah's hope, which had been teetering since she walked in, wobbled again. "Couldn't I just show him in person?" "I'm afraid Mr. Whittaker isn't on site today," Dana said. "He travels often." 2 hours later, Hannah walked back out of the Westcliff Bay Hotel with the painting still under her arm and a polite rejection letter in her coat pocket. She had tried the terrace, the lounge, even the hallway outside the spa. No one was interested. By the time she reached the bus stop, the wind had picked up, scattering salt spray from the cliffs. The last bus of the afternoon was already rumbling down the road. She broke into a run, boots pounding the pavement, the painting thudding against her hip. The bus pulled away just as she reached the signpost. She stood there, breathing hard, watching it disappear around a curve. That was when she heard a voice behind her. "Miss, are you okay?" She turned to see a woman in a navy hotel uniform, a name tag reading Carmen. She looked about 40, with dark hair pulled into a bun and an expression of tired kindness. Hannah shook her head, blinking against the sting in her eyes. "No, I missed my bus, and I didn't sell the painting. It was the only thing I had left to try." Carmen's gaze flicked to the bundle in Hannah's arms, then back to her face. "How far do you live?" "Far enough that I can't walk, and I don't have money for a cab." Carmen looked over her shoulder toward the glowing lobby doors, then back again. "I've got a room key in my pocket. If you don't mind breaking a few rules, you could stay warm tonight. Tomorrow morning, you'll catch the first bus." Hannah stared at her. "You'd do that for me, even if it could get you in trouble?" "Trouble comes and goes," Carmen said with a shrug. "Freezing to death doesn't." Carmen kept her pace brisk as she led Hannah through a side entrance near the service drive, the kind of door guests weren't supposed to see. Inside, the air was warm and smelled faintly of laundry detergent and lemon polish. A few staff members glanced up as they passed, housekeepers rolling carts stacked with fresh towels, a bellhop hauling crates toward the kitchen. But no one said anything. "Keep your head down," Carmen murmured. "In hotels like this, the fewer questions people ask, the better." They took a narrow stairwell 2 flights up. Carmen stopped in front of a polished oak door at the far end of a hallway lined with thick carpet. She slid a keycard into the lock, and the door clicked open. The suite took Hannah's breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the moonlit sweep of the bay, and a gas fireplace flickered in the corner. A vase of lilies stood on a marble-topped table, their scent softening the sharpness of the sea air drifting through a cracked window. "I shouldn't even be showing you this," Carmen said, her voice low. "This suite runs more per night than I make in a month. But it's empty, and you're not the kind of trouble I'm supposed to worry about." Hannah clutched the painting to her chest. "Thank you, I mean it. I don't know how I can." "You can start by locking that door and staying quiet," Carmen interrupted gently. "Housekeeping starts early. I'll bring you coffee before the morning shift. Just don't leave anything behind." After Carmen left, Hannah set the painting on the bed. In the soft light, the golden grove looked even more alive, like it had been waiting for this room instead of the damp little cinder-block shelter she and her mother had been calling home. She showered in water, hot enough to sting, and found a plush robe in the wardrobe. For a few stolen hours, the weight in her chest eased. She curled up on the sofa, sipping from a complimentary bottle of sparkling water, pretending, just for tonight, that this could be her life. But she didn't sleep deeply. Somewhere after midnight, voices drifted in from the hallway. A man's, low and clipped, a woman's, sharp in reply. The words were muffled, but the tone was unmistakable. Someone was upset. Hannah tiptoed to the door and listened. "Don't care if the reservation got cancelled," the man was saying. "We don't put anyone in the East Bay suite without my approval." Her stomach tightened. East Bay suite. Was that where she was? The woman's voice came again, this time clearer. "You've been gone for days, James. I had to make a judgment call." "Not like this," he replied, the edge in his tone cutting even through the heavy door. Their footsteps moved away. Hannah slipped back into the robe, heart pounding. Whoever James was, he didn't sound like someone who forgave easily. By sunrise, she was already up, the painting rewrapped and propped by the door. Carmen slipped in quietly, a paper cup of coffee in hand and a croissant wrapped in a napkin. "Morning," Carmen whispered. "Bus comes in 40 minutes. You should be at the stop 10 minutes early. Mr. Whitaker's back in the building today, and trust me, you don't want him catching you." Hannah's pulse jumped. "Is he the one who was in the hallway last night? James?" "That's him. James Whitaker. Runs this place like a kingdom," Carmen said. "And let's just say, he's not exactly patient with people who don't fit his idea of a paying guest." "Got it," Hannah said quickly. She gathered her things and followed Carmen out through the same service door, every nerve buzzing with the awareness that she'd come far too close to being found out. She made it to the bus stop with minutes to spare. The wind was stronger this morning, carrying the tang of salt and the cry of gulls over the cliffs. Hannah sipped the last of her coffee, trying not to think about the warmth of that suite or how easily it could have all ended differently. She didn't know that James Whitaker was already in the lobby, reading over a brief note left by an overnight security guard about unregistered activity on the East Bay floor. And he had no idea yet that the stranger in question carried something that would pull him straight into her life. The wind on the bus ride back into town rattled the windows, and Hannah kept her arm tight around the painting. Every bump in the road made her stomach clench. If anything happened to it, there would be no backup plan. She tried not to replay the night before in her head, But the images came anyway. The suite's quiet luxury, the man's clipped voice in the hallway, the way Carmen's eyes had sharpened when she said his name. Hannah had slipped out of there clean. At least, she thought she had. By mid-morning, James Whittaker was standing in the East Bay suite, arms folded as he surveyed the room. Housekeeping had left it spotless. Pillows fluffed, curtains drawn, the faint scent of lilies still lingering. But on the desk by the window, wrapped in a worn bedsheet, sat an object that most certainly did not belong to any hotel inventory list. He unwrapped it slowly, revealing a golden grove of pine trees, sunlight filtering through the branches like shards of amber. It was skillfully done. Too skilled to be some mass-produced decorative piece. The brushwork was deliberate, the colours warm but restrained. James tilted his head. He didn't know much about art, but he knew enough to recognise when something had been painted by hand. And something about the grove tugged faintly at the back of his mind, as though he'd stood in that light once before. He carried it to the front desk. "Who stayed in this suite last night?" The clerk, a young man whose tie looked strangled, glanced at the computer. Sir, the suite was unoccupied. No check-ins." James's brow furrowed. "Then someone was here. Find out who had access, and check with security. Any footage from the service entrance." Back in her neighbourhood, Hannah was unlocking the shelter's door when she froze. The painting wasn't under her arm. She dropped her bag and yanked it open, searching frantically through the worn interior. Nothing. Her chest tightened. She must have left it in the suite when she set it by the door. The blood drained from her face. That painting wasn't just her last hope. It was her mother's heart. At the hotel, James was still holding the painting when Carmen passed through the lobby. She stopped mid-step, her eyes widening. "Where did you get that?" "From a suite that was supposed to be empty," James replied evenly. "Care to explain?" Carmen's gaze darted to the exit, then back to the painting. "I might know who it belongs to." "Good. Then you'll arrange for them to meet me," James said, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. That afternoon, when Hannah's phone buzzed with a text from Carmen, "Come to the hotel, now," her stomach dropped. She was going to have to walk straight into the world she'd been trying to tiptoe around. And she had no idea that James Whittaker's interest in the painting wasn't just about its artistry. It was about something that had been missing from his life for nearly 20 years. Hannah's palms were damp as she crossed the Westcliffe's marble-floored lobby, each footstep echoing too loudly in her ears. The space felt different in daylight, crisp, intimidating, almost sterile. Yet she could still picture herself curled in that suite last night, warm and safe. At the reception desk, Carmen spotted her immediately and motioned her over. She didn't smile. "He's in his office," she murmured. "Don't lie to him, Hannah. He can tell." Hannah's mouth went dry. "What does he want?" "Ask him yourself." James Whittaker's office was all clean lines and understated expense. Walnut shelves, black leather chairs, a single abstract painting on the wall. He was standing by the window when she stepped in, one hand in his pocket, the other resting on the back of a chair. On his desk, propped like an exhibit, was her painting. "So," he said without turning around, "you're the unregistered guest from last night." Hannah hesitated. I didn't mean to cause trouble. Carmen was just helping me out for one night. He faced her then, eyes sharp but not unkind. And this? You left it behind? Her gaze dropped to the painting. It's mine. Well, my mother painted it. I came back to get it, but... She stopped, realizing how desperate that sounded. James studied her face. Your mother, what's her name? Evelyn Grace. The name landed in the room like a weight. Something flickered in James's expression. Surprise, recognition, maybe even something softer, but it was gone in an instant. I knew an Evelyn Grace, he said slowly. A long time ago. Hannah blinked. You knew her? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he gestured to the chair opposite his desk. Sit down. Tell me why you're carrying around one of her paintings in a bedsheet. She told him the bare bones, the shelter, her mother's illness, the plan to sell the painting for medical bills. She left out the worst of it, the late-night worry that her mother might not make it through another winter. When she finished, James leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. That painting isn't just worth something, he said. It's part of a series. Evelyn painted 6 like it. 5 are in private collections now. I own one myself. Her head jerked up. You own one? He nodded. And if this is what I think it is, collectors would pay far more than you're imagining. Hannah's pulse quickened, hope and suspicion tangling in her chest. Why are you telling me this? James's gaze didn't waver. Because I have questions for your mother. And because, if I'm right, this painting belongs in a very different conversation than the one you were planning to have with a pawn shop. Hannah left the office an hour later, clutching the painting once more. But now it felt heavier, like it carried not just her future, but her mother's past. And in his office, James Whittaker stared out at the bay, the name Evelyn Grace echoing in his mind. He hadn't thought about her in 20 years, not since the summer she vanished without explanation, taking something from him he'd never quite been able to replace. It had taken 2 days for James to agree to come to the shelter. Not because he didn't want to see Evelyn Grace again, he did, but because some part of him feared what he might find. The woman he remembered had been vibrant, magnetic, impossible to ignore. Time, he knew, could change a person beyond recognition. When he finally stepped into the narrow common room, Hannah was waiting by the door, the painting wrapped once more in its worn bedsheet. She's having one of her better mornings, Hannah said quietly. But she gets tired fast. Evelyn was in a padded armchair by the window, a plaid blanket over her knees. Her hair, once a deep chestnut, had gone silver, but her profile, sharp nose, delicate mouth, was exactly as James remembered. She was reading, glasses perched low on her nose. Mum, Hannah said gently, there's someone here to see you. Evelyn looked up. Her eyes, pale green and still piercing, landed on James. She froze. The book slipped from her lap. James, she whispered. Hannah's gaze darted between them. You know each other? James stepped forward, his voice low. Hello, Evelyn. It's been a long time. The silence stretched. Hannah felt like she'd stumbled into a conversation 20 years in progress. Finally, Evelyn laughed once, softly. I didn't think I'd ever see you again. Not after. She stopped herself, glancing at Hannah. After you disappeared, James said, the edge in his tone impossible to miss. Evelyn looked away. It wasn't that simple. It never is, James replied. He took the painting from Hannah and set it gently on Evelyn's lap. Do you remember this? Her fingers traced the brushstrokes. Of course, it's from the Grove series. You bought the first one. Hannah stared. You sold these paintings to him? Evelyn shook her head slowly. No, sweetheart. That first one I gave to him. As a gift. The room seemed to shrink. Hannah felt suddenly small. Like there were entire chapters of her mother's life she had never been allowed to read. James's eyes never left Evelyn's. We need to talk about what happened back then, and about the other paintings. Evelyn's shoulders sagged. If we talk, James, Hannah will learn everything. Are you sure you want that? I think it's time she did, he said. That night, as Hannah lay on the cot in the small back room of the shelter, she couldn't stop replaying the moment her mother had said his name. Evelyn had spoken it like someone opening a door they had sworn never to touch again. Whatever lay behind it, Hannah knew one thing. This meeting had set something in motion, and she wasn't sure if she should be afraid of what was coming or desperate to know. The next morning, James returned. Not to the hotel, not for business, but to the shelter. He came without a suit this time, wearing a navy sweater and jeans, though nothing about him looked casual. Hannah was waiting in the hallway, uncertain if she should feel grateful or wary. She's in the lounge, she said, leading him in. Evelyn sat at a round table, a cup of tea cooling in front of her. Her hands trembled slightly when she saw him. James, she said, you didn't have to. I did, he cut in. He pulled out a chair and sat across from her, his voice steady but clipped. You left without saying a word. Do you know what that did to me? Evelyn's lips parted, but no sound came. Hannah sank into a nearby seat, clutching her knees. She felt like a trespasser, but couldn't make herself leave. James's gaze softened, though his jaw remained tight. We had plans, Evelyn. I bought that first painting because I believed in you, your work, your future. You promised you'd stay in the city, build your name, let me help you. And then one morning, you were gone. Evelyn's fingers gripped her teacup. I didn't want to be saved, James. Not if it meant owing you everything. Owing me? His voice cracked. It was never about debt. He stopped, glancing at Hannah, then back to Evelyn. I cared for you, more than you ever let yourself believe. Hannah's stomach twisted. She had seen her mother sad before, angry before, but never like this, her expression a mix of longing and regret. Evelyn turned to her daughter. Sweetheart, when I left James, I was already pregnant with you. The words landed like a physical blow. Hannah stared at her mother, then at James, whose eyes widened in stunned disbelief. You're saying, James began, his voice rough. I'm saying I didn't want you to feel trapped, Evelyn said, and I didn't want Hannah to grow up thinking her mother had chased comfort instead of independence. Hannah's pulse thundered in her ears. She'd lived 22 years believing her father was a nameless man her mother didn't want to talk about. Now she was sitting in a drafty shelter lounge, staring at the possibility that James Whittaker, a man who owned half the bayfront properties in the city, might be that man. James leaned back slowly, running a hand over his face. Evelyn, if that's true, you've taken away 22 years I could have known her. I know, Evelyn whispered, and I can't change it. But I can try to explain. Hannah swallowed hard, her mind a tangle of disbelief, anger, and an odd, aching curiosity. For the first time, she wanted answers more than she wanted to protect herself from them. The lounge felt colder than usual, though the radiator clicked and hummed in the corner. Hannah sat with her hands clasped so tightly, her knuckles whitened. James was leaning forward, elbows on his knees, his voice low but edged with steel. Evelyn, he said, if you expect me to believe this, believe her, then I need more than your word. I want the truth, all of it. Evelyn's eyes shifted between them, as if searching for a way to make the story hurt less. She didn't find one. All right, she said at last. But you may wish you'd never asked. She took a breath, the kind that seemed to scrape the air from her lungs. When I met you, James, you were everything I thought I wanted. Steady, confident, certain of yourself. I was 21, painting in a borrowed studio, sleeping on a pull-out couch. You made it feel like the world was possible. But you had shadows. A family that saw me as an interloper. A father who made it clear that if I stayed, he would make my life and yours hell. James's brow furrowed. My father? Evelyn. Thanks, she said. But this was that, this kind of feeling between her breath and sleeping. But the audio felt as if it was slipping away. She gently looked into a bright geode into her eyes. And when I remembered the breakfast, that's when she understood. A face that said to her, how you feel today. Did someone get any positive emotion from what you said? She looked into your eyes and smiled. And when James' brow furrowed, we didn't think you might. He barely knew you. He knew enough. Hannah blinked rapidly, trying to keep up. You left to protect him. I left to protect both of you, Evelyn said, looking at her daughter. If I'd stayed, I'd have been trapped in a fight we couldn't win. So I hid. I kept painting, but under other names. I took jobs no one could trace back to me. And I told myself you were better off not knowing. James's hands tightened into fists. You should have told me. We could have fought him together. Evelyn's laugh was bitter. You didn't know your father the way I did. He would have torn us apart, James. Not just emotionally. He had power, and he wasn't afraid to use it. The silence that followed was heavy, punctuated only by the muffled sounds of traffic outside. Hannah stared at her mother, then at James, and felt the ground under her feet shift. So what now? Hannah asked, her voice sharper than she meant. We just pretend this conversation didn't happen? Or do we deal with it? Evelyn's gaze dropped. That depends on whether James still wants to be part of your life, and whether you want him in it. James looked at Hannah, his expression a mixture of hope and grief. That's your choice now. Hannah didn't answer right away. She felt the weight of both pairs of eyes on her. The mother who had raised her alone, the man who might have been there all along. "I don't know you," she said finally, turning to James. "Not really. But if everything you've said is true, I'd like to try." James's shoulders dropped, the tension in them easing for the first time since he'd walked in. "That's all I could ask for." Evelyn's face was unreadable, relief tangled with something like fear. She folded her hands on the table. "If this is going to work, then no more hiding. Not from each other, not from the past." Over the next few weeks, James began visiting regularly. Sometimes they met at the shelter. Sometimes he took Hannah out for coffee or to see an art exhibit. He never pressed too hard, but he asked questions about her childhood, her work, the small rituals that made up her life. One afternoon, he brought her a thin folder. Inside were photographs Evelyn had taken years ago. All of them tucked away in a storage unit James had kept after she left. "She was brilliant," James said, smiling faintly. "You have her eye. The way you look at the world, it's hers." Hannah traced the edges of the photos, feeling a strange warmth grow in her chest. Evelyn, for her part, kept her promise. She told Hannah stories she'd never shared before. The night she and James first met at a gallery opening. The months she'd spent selling sketches on street corners. The quiet fear that had never fully left her. There were awkward moments, too. Hannah still struggled with the years of absence, and James still carried the sting of being shut out. But slowly, the edges of their conversations softened. On a crisp Saturday morning, the three of them stood together at the waterfront market. Hannah bought a small sketch from a young artist who reminded her of her mother at 21. Evelyn slipped her arm through her daughter's, and James walked beside them, hands in his pockets. It wasn't the family they could have had. It wasn't perfect, but it was something new, something honest. And as they crossed the old footbridge back toward the city, Hannah realized that sometimes the years you've lost can't be recovered. But you can choose what to build with the ones ahead. If you like the story, I would be very happy to have your support. Click the thumbs up. And to not miss new stories, subscribe and click on the bell. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, and all the best.